The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, well, welcome everyone to this meeting of the virtual CICS user group. I'm Trevor Eddles. I'm CEO of iTechEd Limited. We're a mainframe consultancy, analysis and technical authoring organisation. We're the people responsible for the content on the virtual CICS website, and we also produce the newsletter each month. If you have friends who do IMS, we also look after the virtual IMS user group. So, first of all, then I'd like to run through the agenda for this meeting. As usual, most of the meeting will be taken up with the presentation, and today our guest presenter is Glenn Schneck. He's Principal Technical Architect at GT Software, and his presentation is called From Legacy to Leading Edge, Creating CICS APIs Easily Without Coding. And a copy of the slides from this presentation will be on the website probably an hour after this meeting finishes. And if you're on the website, then you can see previous meetings or download copies of the presentations. Like I say, you can listen again to them. And the link for that is on the resources pages of the website. Following Glenn's presentation and any questions you have for him, we'll move on to the latest CICS news, CICS related articles. Feedback request is there to remind me to ask you for your feedback about this virtual meeting. Then I'll give you the dates and times of the next couple of virtual meetings. So that's the plan. I'm anticipating that we'll be here for about 45 minutes-ish, something like that. Okay, so as I just said, today's presentation is from Glenn Schneck. Glenn has 43 years of IT experience and 34 years of CICS systems programming and experience, and that's in insurance, entertainment, theme parks, and banking. Glenn has been a speaker at numerous conferences and is currently the project manager of the CICS project at Share. And Glenn is currently a principal technical architect at GT Software. So, Glenn, I'd like to thank you very much for being with us today. And what I'm going to do now is pass control of the meeting over to you. So let me do that now. Okay.
Okay, Trevor, can everybody see my screen?
Yep, see your screen, see your slides. That's great. You're good to go.
Well, thank you, Trevor, and thank you all for attending. I know you have busy jobs to do, and appreciate the time you spend taking to attend this webinar. Like Trevor said, we're going to talk about creating CICS APIs and using our GT Software's Ivory product, where we create the APIs without any additional coding required. So what is an API? Well, basically an API is just is a way for different applications to communicate with each other. Now, in the older days of CICS, applications were written for screen in, screen out. Although there was the CICS API that is being used, it was more of a screen in, screen out technology. But today, as you can see with this chart, there's been an explosion in all different areas of mainframe applications, from retail to financial to health to travel. Many different areas today are being incorporated into other applications. So APIs are here to stay. Let's make the best use of them. All right. Today's world is rapidly moving to what IBM will call the API economy, where APIs become the means by which digital enterprises are going to do business between each other. You'll see that many of the web services, mobile sites, interact or built upon an API. You can have your APIs either a public API for consumption by the general public or a private API to be consumed by your internal applications. The API economy, you have providers and consumers with many core applications that are still residing on the mainframe. There's nothing new about APIs. I mean, they've been evolving over the past decades, but the key is that they have common standards by which the provider and the consumer can easily talk across and communicate across their applications. You have SOAP, XML, REST JSON, and now the standards for most APIs that are in use today. All right. Well, how do we get it from the mainframe? Well, from the view of the mainframe, you have all your legacy applications, whether it be in CICS, whether it be an IMS, or 3270 application using PL1 assembler COBOL, DB2, vSAM. How do you get to this data? And we have those applications are wanted and needed in the modern world, whether you're using a mobile or web-based access for it. So the key question is, how can we do this in an effective manner? Well, over the years, IBM, as well as other vendors, have provided a number of mainframe connector technologies that make it easier to do real-time integration into your back-end mainframe legacy systems. You can do everything from TN3270 screen scraping, SQL emulation, to non-relational files such as a vSAM, or a number of online transaction pipes you can use, such as CICS Transaction Gateway, CICS Web Services, and the most recent incarnation from IBM is ZOS Connect Enterprise Edition. I know this is a CICS webinar, but you can also, on the IMS side, there's IMS Connect, and there's also a third-party product from HostBridge that is a mainframe connector type. So, what are the challenges with this level of connection technology? That's very low level, microservices, and if you wrap in these services and expose them as APIs, we're now in what we call a danger zone. A danger zone where you will need a lot of low-level coding on the consumer side in order to integrate properly with these single transaction or microservice APIs. Not only will the consumer side need it, every consumer application that wants to run these individual microservices, such as a get savings, get checking, a get part, get inventory, etc., they will have to code for each application that they want to use. And if you think about that, what will be the exponential growth of code that's going to be written and maintained by each consuming application? These are just single transaction APIs without any business service intelligence built on top of them. So the business applications on the right side here, you can see the insurance APIs, the bank and that type of stuff. The right-hand side are trying to get more intelligent for the end user. What they like to do is they like to combine these microservices into a business process. A business process would be where they could call the process will go and take care of calling all the other single APIs and returning back a single return. So it would be better for the consumer if they're able to get all their account information in a single call. Say they call Get Customer. Well, then Get Customer will have the responsibility and the intelligence to run the individual microservices and return a single response containing all of the customer information. Now, developing those APIs, the composite APIs, would be easier if there was a more sophisticated way to do it. And that composite API can communicate with the microservice APIs. So now your front-end consumers don't have to do all this extra coding, maintaining the coding, and you can have one composite API that multiple consumers can use. So you don't have to have the maintaining, and like I said, the maintaining and the coding on the consumer side. So what are some of the challenges? All right. Now, we're talking about CICS systems that may be 20, 30, even 40 years old. And how do those CICS systems integrate with the front end today? Well, the next couple slides, we're going to be talking about some of the challenges. The reality you see on the left, the bad part, some structures don't map well. The names in COBOL can be cryptic because remember when the COBOL was made or written, all those internal copybooks and copybook names didn't need to be exposed to a front end. So what you need to do is find a way to be able to rename those COBOL copybooks fields into something that the front end can understand. And then you have BMS maps could have a macros that set your input values. If a user doesn't fill in a field, it has a default input value that the BMS map fills in. These are all challenges that you need to consider when you're trying to expose your APIs. Some other things we have is you want to expose your transactions as REST or SOAP. Well, that's okay, except your transaction may be so fine-grained that there'll be so much information that the consumer would have to code for that it would just be too unwieldy for them to do. Or you might have multiple transaction dependencies. You have programs that run, you've got programs that could return multiple output formats that were designed for terminals based on input. How do you handle that? Or you may have data coming back from the API that it's a volume that's just way too big for a distributed client. So you have to figure out how to minimize that. In CICS, you could hit a PF key, which equates to a transcode. And you may need multiple transactions in sequence. These are all things that you need to consider when you're trying to write your APIs. Additionally, you want to combine one transaction, one service, like we just talked about. You have these fine-grained transactions. You want to have it as a composite, as a business service. How do you do that? Well, you can do that, but the API may take minutes to run, depending on how it's coded. If you have to code on the consumer side, you don't know how long that's going to take. You don't know how long it's going to take to develop. You don't know how long it's going to take to run. And how do you handle conversational transactions? I know CICS years and years and years ago was encouraging people to shy away from conversational transactions. Well, maybe you still have some out there. How do you handle that? Just remember, if you have a long-running conversation, your API is going to be long-running also. Then you have the issue of rollback. How do you roll back a transaction as it ends? These are all things that need to be considered when you're looking at your mainframe API development. So again, to reiterate the point that we were talking about before, as to why you don't want to create and provide single transaction APIs, think about the challenges that we discussed integrating the CICS applications. Think about what would happen if get part, get order, et cetera, brings back multiple pages of information. Do you want every single consumer application to have to code for those possibilities or maybe other possible solutions, situations? So what you really need is some level of intelligence between the two worlds. You need to be able to develop a business level API that's able to orchestrate in an intelligent way, go through multiple steps, multiple processes, and that's what we have in our technology called Ivory from GT Software. There's two parts to Ivory. There's the Ivory server, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, and there's the Ivory Studio. What you see here is a snapshot of the Ivory Studio. It's a Windows-based IDE, drag and drop, flowchart-oriented product that allows you to create intelligent APIs. It can be multiple transactions. You can use it with multiple data sources. If you have to pull information from an SAP system, for example, to integrate with some of your CICS stuff. Or if you need to go out to external web services, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, or to external APIs. If you want to do conditional logical checking, how do you do error handling, governance and security? All these things are things that you need to consider when you're looking at an API development tool. But the main thing that we've tried to do as a developer, as a software vendor, is to make it as easy as possible for the customers to be able to create these APIs and have no low-level coding requirements to use our product. You can do this easily, it's fast, and you can do it in an agile development. So what is important, what's also important here is the fact that Ivory can support the lower level single transaction APIs and combine these APIs to create the business services, including access to Ivory APIs as well as other external APIs. And this includes if you have any CICS legacy CICS web services that you've already developed, we can incorporate those. The microservice business services are created without any additional lines of code. And it also makes it easier on the consumer side, who is now communicating with the intelligent API that knows what he's looking for, and the API will orchestrate to the lower level APIs. What I like to do now, I ran through them a little fast, but what I'd like to do now is show you a demo of our Ivory product. Come on. There we go. As I said before, this is the Ivory Studio. It's a Windows-based IDE, and we also are able to create a project using what we have as our wizard. So what we'll do is we'll just say we want to create a new project, and we'll come down here, our new project wizard. We could do SOAP or REST, and we could do CICS. That's IMS. We can do CICS COM area. We can use BMS, mixed mode. We can do TN3270 within CICS. If you also have an existing web service with a WSDL, we can do a top-down service and import that WSDL into Ivory. But what we're going to do right now is just a COM area. And we have to name the project. Just name the project. You could also put some documentation in here that will show up on the HTML file that's created. And then we just do a web service operation, basically whatever you want it to be. Now we're coming to a point where we're going to look at the copybooks. All right? You could have that copybook in your local file system in your PC or shared drive, or you can actually FTP it down from the mainframe each time. So we're going to come out here. And I got to remember where I put that. There we go. So when you do that, this screen pops up, and it's asking you if you really want to import this copybook into Ivory. Well, you see this is a very large copybook. All right. So what we're going to do is we will import it. And it defaults to the same output copybook, which in this case, that's what we want, but you could use a different output copybook. And you give it the initial program. This screen gives you the ability to pick which fields you want. Rather than sending all these screens back and forth, the input of this on this API is going to be last name and first name. All right? Just hit next. And the output, we don't want everything coming back. We only want this search data to come back. We could do it that way, or we could just pick out fields that we want. All right? And then we say finish. And you now have an API created. Now, in order to run the API, we'll have to deploy it to our server.
Glenn, can I just ask you a question?
Sure.
Does Ivory require any other products like RDV or ZOS Connect, etc.?
No, sir, it does. No, sir, it does not. We can integrate if you have ZOS Connect. We can work with it, but it's not required at all. The only thing that's required is the Ivory server and the Ivory Studio.
Okay, thank you.
And if you're running your studio in Windows or Linux, you'll need some type of connect like a CTG. We do test here. Tell what request we want. Let's see, Mary Smith. And if my connection is still up, there we go. So we now have created a workable API that will bring back the account number and first name, last name from our database. Yeah, what this actually did is you see this thing here is we actually called this program within CICS using that input and output copybooks. And then we went through some stuff. Here you have decision points for arrays. We handle occurs depending on, we handle redefines, we handle all that COBOL stuff. So that's how easy it is to create an API. What I want to show you now is some real life APIs. This was actually done for a bank and financial company in Europe. But what they needed to do is they needed to call a CICS to get some information. They call out a web service out to get a stock price. They get some more information from a 3270 screen. Then they do a mathematical calculation to see how many stocks you can buy based on your account balance. And then it moves it to the output. So hopefully I have everything in place for this. Deploy it. Test it. And let's see if Mary can buy some IBM stock. As you can see here, Mary has enough money in her $20,000 credit limit at a share price of $82.19 to buy 243 shares of IBM stock. So in this one, we've combined a COM area program, a call out to a web service, an external web service, and a 3270 process, took that data, did a mathematical calculation, and came out with the response. So what we'll show you next. This is a, oh wait, I already got it open somewhere. Ah, there it is. This is an actual CICS project from one of our customers that allow us to show it. One of the things you can do is you can have a single API, but that API can do different functions, all right? This one here, if they're requesting the web service operation get county detail, it'll follow this leg. If they're doing get county list, it'll follow this leg. If they're going get town detail, it'll follow this leg. And if they get town list, it'll follow this leg. And as you can see, there's loops involved, decision nodes, switch cases. We handle just about everything. If you look over here in the toolbox, these are all the things these are all the nodes that are available to you. There's actually some more down here. Those are the nodes that are always available to you to create this. And there's some very powerful things you can do in this function node, and switch case is very useful also. So it's all point and click. It's all intuitive, easy to use, easy to implement. Are there any questions on the demo? Okay.
Yeah, no questions have come up yet. If they do, I'll call them out to you.
So let's talk about deployment options. I mentioned before, you can run it on a Windows or a Linux server in Java. You can run it actually as a OS started task in ZOS. You can run it inside a CICS region. And when I just ran my demo, I actually went to a ZOS started task. All right. So the runtime server is actually where the orchestrations are deployed and executed at. All right. It can be installed, like I said, either on or off the mainframe, depending on your requirements. If you do run it as a started task, we do utilize a zip processor, specialty processor. It can run it on the IFL specialty engine, as we mentioned. And we also mentioned it could run as Windows, Java, Linux. But some customers actually use a hybrid approach, where they run some of their APIs on Windows, Linux, and some on the mainframe. It can also be configured to do load balancing and failover. And the important thing is that you don't need any special environments on the mainframe. You don't need Liberty, you don't need anything like that. You don't need WAS or any of that stuff. You just need the Ivory server itself. There's also a component for SQL to non-relational databases, so VCM and that kind of stuff. So we talked about the connectors before, and how do we make everything work together? Well, the API connectors could be anything. It could be another web service. It could be a ETL tool, BI tool. We run under Tomcat, WebSphere, JBoss, any application server, ZOS Connect. And it could support any of the connectors out there. And we also support REST and SOAP that the consumers can choose to use, whatever they want to use. Mainframe side, you see the connectors there. If you're running off host, you'll use one of those connectors to get to the mainframe APIs. If you run on ZOS, you just run start a task in ZOS or in CICS region. Just give you an idea of where Ivory is today. This is a luxury sports car manufacturer not to be named in Germany. What they had a need. They wanted to allow their users to have more updated information when the user designed their own car. The user can go to the website. They can pick out specifications for the car. But before Ivory, those specifications would have had to been downloaded and they weren't up to date. They weren't real time. What Ivory allowed them to do is that if you change say the brakes in your car and then the color goes from red to yellow, that web page will call into Ivory, which runs CICS transactions in the background to get those specs, and then sends it back to the web page. So now they're getting up-to-date, real-time information. What were the results? They found out that they had no additional MIPS. They were able to develop, publish, and use the web services within less than a day. No program additional personnel required. That's interesting because Ivory can actually be used by a mainframe person or a distributed person. So it's not a mainframe only. It's good if you know the mainframe or have an idea of the copybooks and that kind of stuff. But anybody can use it after some minimal training. Insurance industry. There's a mutual insurance company. I don't know what of the 50 states they don't sell in. It might be Hawaii. I'm not sure. But what they needed to do is they needed to expose and consume web services, and they did not. They wanted to use legacy as much as possible. So they were very active in their approach to mainframe SOA. What they found out is that by using other things besides Ivory, is that they were spending more than 50% of the time just setting it up in the plumbing, the definitions in CICS, the definitions in RDZ or whatever, and they were really, really slow in their development efforts. They also wanted to create composite applications, which was causing them to consider to write much code on the distributed side in order to do that. Here's where I talked about the training. Each of their users had 2 hours of training, and they were able to to go and do it. They were processing over 400,000 Ivory-based services a day. And they were also serving 10 of the applications across 7 business areas. So it was a very big, as you can see, the strong ROI was within 1 year. So it was a very big help to them in order to use Ivory as opposed to alternative methods. This is a educational testing company. If you've ever taken an SAT or an ACT or a GMAT, any of those tests, they come from this company. What they needed immediate credit approval in their process. And they also needed to track the candidate scoring, testing, whatever. They had back-end online systems, 2 of them, but they needed real-time communication with a third-party processor. And what we were able to do with them is this is actually an IDMS shop, CICS and IDMS. What we were actually doing to them is we have the ability to create a stub for your program to call out to a web service. So your COBOL program can now call out to web services. And what they were able to do with that is they were able, in their process, in their flow, they were able to call out to MasterCard, Visa, American Express. But they also had a need where they wanted to send you to the closest testing center. And in order to do that, they needed to know where you were. So part of the process, again, was to call out to Google to do a geocache search to find out where you were, and that gave them the ability to point you to the closest testing centers. What they were able to do is first of all, they had a very, very aggressive time frame. They were able to meet that. But now they created a common interface for all their processes. We worked with them to add encryption for their PCI compliance, and they ended up getting at least an 80% reuse of their web services, which they thought was extremely good. This is we work with the government. They have a mainframe system called the Criminal Justice Information System. And what we're able to do with them is help them create the APIs to integrate data from 3270 screens into an API to allow them to create the mobile and web applications that they needed to. They found that it was seamless. We gave them access to the data, whether it's transactions or directly from databases. And they had greater efficiency across all law enforcement entities, which is something that was key to them. So ultimately, your choice is going to come down to this. You want to implement APIs, you want to create mainframe APIs, you want to integrate your mainframe into your ecosystem. How do you do it? Well, we're saying there's 2 ways to do it. First way is you can do lots of low-level coding. You make your web service in several days. We have chosen the way to make it efficient for your users to use our advanced technology of Ivory so that you can build them the same functionality much faster with no coding involved. It makes the implementation and maintenance that much easier. And Trevor, I'll turn it back over to you unless you have any questions coming in.
Okay, now let's give people a minute to see if there's any questions. I mean, if anyone does think of a question after the session, then Glenn's email address is on screen, so you can either email him or email me, and I'll pass it on to Glenn to answer. I can't see any questions coming. If they do, I'll just pause, but I will move on. And let me say thank you very much, Glenn. That was really interesting. So, as usual, can you assume that we're giving you a virtual round of applause for your presentation? So,
Yeah, thank you everybody for taking the time to attend this webinar.
okay, thank you. Let's give me back control. Okay, I said I promised you I'd tell you about the news, but since we last met, I haven't had any news. So if anyone knows of any products or services that are being updated, please let me know. Oh, there's Dave Murray is asking, Glenn, he's asking, isn't GT Ivory a competitor of ZOS Connect?
No, we don't need ZOS Connect, but we can integrate with ZOS Connect. And if you have your APIs in ZOS Connect, we can be the composite engine in front of it to create the business services.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, I'll carry on then. Articles. There have been quite a lot on the CICS Dev Center, so I'll just run through them. Enterprise Architects, an introduction to Node.js in CICS. That's by Mark Cocker. And he also wrote Node.js Developers, an introduction to Node.js in CICS. And he wrote System Programmers, an introduction to Node.js in CICS. John Collett wrote CICSplex Name Detector. And we've got Configuring Kerberos on CICS with RACF and Microsoft Active Directory, and that's by John Taylor. Then we've got another group of them. This is OSGI Demystified, JRE Class Visibility, Boot Delegation, and System Package.extra, and that's by Ian Hargreaves. He also wrote OSGI Demystified, OSGI Services, and Bundles continued, Bundles in Liberty, and OSGI Demystified, Bundles of Fun, and those are all by Ivan Hargreaves. Then we got Want Important Communications from IBM Support, subscribe to IBM My Notifications, and that's by Teresa Hamilton. What are the featured toggles doing in CICS Transaction Server? That's by Colin Penfold. CICS-CM continues to provide additional capabilities to address customer requirements. That's by Satish Tanna. CICS Performance Analyzer continues to provide new capabilities to address customer requirements, again by Satish Tanna. And Workload Management Mapping CICS Explorer, that's by Ben Cox. We've got Using MQ Monitors to Simplify the Administration of CICS MQ Trigger Monitors and MQ Message Consumers by Shui Kao. Not sure on my pronunciation there. Okay. So links to all those articles are on our website. So if you just go to fundy.com/virtual CICS, and everything will be there. So as always, can I ask for feedback about this meeting? You can comment on anything good and anything that you think we can improve on for next time. Again, you can email your comments to me, and my address is on screen at the moment, or you can use the Contact Us webpage. So, as you can see, plan for the future. Our next meeting is on the 11th of September, when we've got Keith Banham, who's Manager Research and Development at Macro 4, which is a division of Unicom Global. And then after that, we're meeting on the 13th of November. And then we have Jason Brosius, who's Senior Software Engineer at CA Technologies. So he'll be presenting then. The actual titles of the presentations I'll publish as soon as I've got them. Oh, and just a reminder that you can keep up to date with what's happening in the world of CICS and on the virtual CICS user group website by following us on Facebook and Twitter, and by joining the virtual CICS group on LinkedIn. And the URLs are all on our homepage of our website, so fundy.com/virtual CICS. And if you can, remember to like us on Facebook. And if you tweet, then the hashtag is hashtag virtual CICS. So that's all for this meeting of the Virtual CICS user group. Can I thank you all for attending? I must thank Fundy Software. They're the people who sponsor this user group and make these meetings possible. And I'd particularly like to thank Glenn Schneck for his presentation. So that's it. Thank you all very much for joining the meeting, and I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday, the 11th of September. So thank you all very much, and goodbye.